"I've loved you for a long time," the drunk Apache woman confessed. Then the rancher's question changed everything. The roads were mostly empty, the sky wide and dark, filled with stars that looked close enough to touch. Wind moved slowly across the land, brushing dry grass and old fences. Most homes had their lights off, families already asleep. Life here followed simple patterns, and people rarely stepped outside them. She walked alone along the edge of the road, her jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. The night air was cool, and the smell of dust and sage followed her with every step. She had lived near this town most of her life, yet she always felt like she stood slightly apart from it. People knew her face, knew her family name, but they did not truly know her. She was Apache, raised with strong values, taught to keep emotions private and dignity intact. Her life had been shaped by responsibility early on. She worked hard, spoke little, and never asked for help. Most people described her as quiet, maybe even distant. Few realized how much she carried inside. Tonight was different. She had told herself she would not go out. She had told herself she did not need company, that she would make tea, sit by the window, and let the night pass. But something restless moved inside her chest. A feeling she could not name pushed her to pick up her keys, lock the door, and walk toward the only bar in town. The bar sat at the edge of the road, its lights warm and low. It was not loud like city places. It was simple, worn, and familiar. People came here after long days, not to celebrate but to rest their minds. When she opened the door, a few heads turned. Nothing obvious, just a quiet noticing. She chose a seat near the corner, away from the center. The wooden stool felt cold under her hands. The bartender nodded, already knowing what she would order. She had been here before, though not often. Tonight the drink burned her throat, but she did not stop. One became two, then another. With each sip, the tight knot inside her loosened slightly. She watched the room without really seeing it. Laughter floated around her, soft conversations, the clink of glasses. She felt both present and far away, as if part of her was standing outside, watching herself from a distance. Then she saw him. He had come in quietly, like he always did. The rancher was a familiar figure in town. Strong but not loud, respected without trying to be. His life was shaped by land and routine, by animals and early mornings. People trusted him because he listened more than he spoke. He did not notice her at first. He greeted the bartender, exchanged a few words with someone near the door, then took a seat not far from her. When he finally looked her way, his expression paused for just a moment. Not surprise, but recognition. Something old passed between them, unspoken. They had known each other for years. Not closely, not openly. Their connection had been built from small moments. A nod at the market, a brief conversation at town gatherings, a shared look that lasted a second too long, then ended. Nothing improper, nothing obvious, just quiet awareness. She looked down at her glass when she felt his eyes on her. Her hands trembled slightly, and she tightened her grip to hide it. She told herself it was the drink. That was easier than admitting the truth. She remembered the first time she had noticed him years ago. He had been standing near his truck, dust on his boots, hat tipped low. He had smiled at her then, a small, respectful smile. She had looked away too quickly. After that, moments like that repeated again and again, never growing into anything more. Tonight, those memories pressed close. The alcohol softened her careful control, and feelings she had kept buried began to rise. She did not plan to speak to him. She only wanted to sit, drink, and leave without making a mark. But the night had other plans. He noticed her glass was empty and that she swayed slightly when she shifted on her stool. Concern crossed his face, quiet but clear. He stood and walked closer, not crowding her space. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded too fast. "I'm fine." She avoided his eyes, but his presence felt solid beside her, like an anchor. "I can walk you home if you want," he said. "It's late." The desert air wrapped around them, cool and open. The stars felt brighter now, as if watching. They walked in silence for a few moments. Gravel shifted under their feet. She focused on the sound, trying to keep her thoughts from spilling out. But the quiet made everything louder inside her. She stumbled slightly, and he reached out without thinking, steadying her arm. His touch was brief and respectful, but it sent a sharp awareness through her. She froze, then relaxed when he pulled back. "Sorry," he said. "It's okay," she replied. They stopped walking without deciding to. She looked at the horizon, at the dark shape of distant hills. Her chest felt tight, then suddenly too open. The words pressed against her throat, demanding release. She laughed softly, a sound that surprised them both. "I didn't plan this," she said. "Plan what?" he asked. She turned to face him. The light from the bar spilled faintly across his face. She could see the lines from sun and work, the steady eyes that had always unsettled her. "I've loved you for a long time," she said. The words hung between them, fragile and real. As soon as they left her mouth, she felt both relief and fear. Years of silence broken in one sentence. She waited for something to happen: rejection, shock, comfort, anything. But he only looked at her, thoughtful and still, as if weighing something far deeper than the moment itself. The night held its breath. She did not know then that this was only the beginning. That a single question, not yet spoken, would change how she saw her past, her choices, and herself. She believed this night would fade like so many others. She was wrong. The words she had spoken did not disappear into the night. They stayed between them, heavy and real, like something that could not be taken back. "I've loved you for a long time." The desert wind passed between them, lifting a strand of her hair. She felt suddenly very aware of herself, her unsteady stance, her loosened guard, the way the night had taken control of her emotions. "You don't have to say anything," she added quickly. "I didn't mean to put this on you." She had survived so much by being strong and quiet. Now she felt exposed. He exhaled slowly. "You should sit for a moment," he said gently, pointing toward a low wooden bench near the building. She wanted to refuse, but her legs felt weak. She sat, folding her hands in her lap the way she had been taught as a child, composed, contained. He remained standing at first, then sat a short distance away, not too close, giving her space. For a while neither of them spoke. She stared at the ground, tracing shapes in the dust with the tip of her boot. The alcohol still warmed her, but the clarity of what she had said began to settle in. Fear crept in behind it. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line," she said quietly. "I never planned to say it. I don't usually drink like this. I didn't want to be misunderstood. I didn't know how to step closer without losing myself." The desert night wrapped around them, quiet and wide, as if giving them permission to be honest. "I noticed you," he said after a moment, "a long time ago." So we both stayed still. "Even if nothing comes of it." "That makes sense." Not disappear, but become less heavy. Eventually, the cool air reminded her of reality. The warmth from the drink faded, leaving a clearer mind and a pounding heart. "I should go," she said. "I don't want to say something I'll regret." She wondered how she would feel in the morning, embarrassed, relieved, afraid. When they reached her place, she stopped at the gate. The house behind her was dark and quiet. "This doesn't have to change anything," she said quickly. "I don't want things to be awkward." Silence does. Inside her house, she leaned against the door once it closed. The quiet pressed in, but it no longer felt empty. She touched her chest, feeling the steady beat of her heart. For the first time in many years, she had spoken her truth. She did not know what would come next. She did not know if love would grow or fade. But she knew one thing for certain. The night had changed her. And somewhere beyond the dark road, a question was forming in the rancher's mind. One that would soon bring everything into sharper focus and force them both to face what silence had cost them. Morning arrived quietly, as if nothing important had happened the night before. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of her small house, touching the walls and the floor in soft lines. Birds moved outside, and somewhere in the distance, a truck engine started and then faded away. The world continued as it always had, but inside her, everything felt different. She woke with a heavy head and a heavier heart. For a moment, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide whether the night had been real or just a blur shaped by exhaustion and drink. Then the memory returned clearly without mercy. The desert air, the bench, his quiet eyes and her words, "I've loved you for a long time." She moved slowly through her morning routine, washing her face, making plain coffee, sitting at the small table by the window. Every familiar action felt slightly altered, as if she were seeing her life from a new angle. She had spent so many years being careful, controlled, and silent. One honest sentence had cracked that careful shape. Across town, the rancher was awake before the sun, as usual. His day began early, shaped by habit and responsibility. But this morning his thoughts did not follow their normal path. As he worked, fed animals, and checked fences, her face returned to his mind again and again. Not the woman he had always known from a distance, but the one who had stood under the stars and spoken with shaking honesty. He replayed the moment in his head, not her confession, but what followed, the look in her eyes, the fear mixed with courage, and the question that had formed in his mind but had not yet been spoken. Why now? By the time the sun rose fully, he knew he could not let the moment pass without clarity. Silence had already shaped too much of their lives. Later that day, she stepped into town, hoping routine would settle her nerves. She moved carefully, half expecting whispers or looks, even though she knew nothing had changed on the surface. People greeted her as they always had, polite and distant. The world had not noticed her private shift. When she saw him walking toward her near the general store, her breath caught. For a second, she considered turning away. Old habits urged her to retreat, but she stayed where she was. He slowed when he reached her. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." Neither smiled at first. The daylight made everything feel more real, less protected than the night. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, her hands folded together without her noticing. "I understand if you'd rather forget it," she said quickly. "That's not what I want," he replied. "I just need to understand something." He paused, choosing his words with care. "You said you loved me for a long time, I believe you. But I need to ask, was it love or was it loneliness? Was it about me or about the life you wished you had?" This was the moment she could laugh it off, turn away, and return to silence. But she had already crossed that line. She took a slow breath. "I've asked myself that question many times," she said, "long before last night." But she also spoke about the way she noticed him even on her best days, not just her empty ones. How his presence had never felt like an escape, but like something steady she did not allow herself to reach for. "It wasn't about filling a space," she said softly. "It was about recognizing something and being too afraid to touch it." "Then why keep it hidden for so long?" "Fear dressed up as dignity." "I noticed you a long time ago," he repeated, this time with more weight. "But I assumed your distance was a boundary I shouldn't cross. I didn't want to misunderstand you or disrespect where you come from, so I chose distance too." Of moments passed by. She felt a sudden sting behind her eyes, but she did not let it show. "I don't regret saying it," she said, "even if nothing comes from it." It was something slower and more honest. They agreed to talk again, not as a reaction to emotion, but as two people willing to understand each other without fear. There was no dramatic farewell, just mutual respect and a quiet shift in how they stood. As she walked home later, she felt the weight of the question he had asked. It had not hurt her. It had sharpened her understanding. She realized how often she had hidden behind silence, telling herself it was strength. That night, she sat by her window again, just as she had planned to do before everything changed. The stars were out, steady and familiar. She thought about the girl she had been, the woman she had become, and the cost of never asking for more. Across the land, the rancher stood outside his house, looking at the same sky. He understood now that respect without honesty could still lead to loss. The question he had asked was not meant to push her away, but to ground them both in truth. Neither of them knew where this path would lead, but for the first time they were no longer walking it in silence, and that made all the difference. The days that followed did not rush forward. They moved slowly, carefully, as if both of them were learning how to walk again after standing still for too long. They began with small meetings, nothing dramatic. Sometimes it was a short conversation outside the store. Sometimes it was a quiet walk along the dirt road near the fields. They did not speak every day, and they did not avoid each other either. What they shared now was not urgency, but intention. She noticed how different it felt to be seen without hiding. For years, she had kept her emotions folded tightly inside, believing that control meant safety. Now, each time she spoke honestly, she felt both lighter and more exposed. It was uncomfortable, but it was also real. The rancher changed in ways that were subtle but meaningful. He listened more deeply than before, not only to her, but to his own thoughts. He realized how often he had assumed distance meant rejection. He had lived by respect and caution, but now he understood that too much caution could also be a kind of fear. One afternoon, they sat on a low fence near his land. The sun was warm and the open fields stretched wide around them. There was no rush to fill the silence. "I used to think keeping space was the right thing," he said quietly. "I thought it meant I was doing no harm. And walls keep everything out, even what might be good." About believing that if something was meant to happen, it would happen without effort. He admitted how lonely that belief had been, even if he rarely said the word out loud. As they spoke, they saw each other more clearly, not as ideas or distant figures, but as real people shaped by choices and fears. There were moments of doubt too. Some days she woke up wondering if she had said too much. Other days he questioned whether opening this door would change things in ways he could not control. They did not hide those thoughts from each other. That honesty, even when it was uncomfortable, became their foundation. One evening they walked together as the sky darkened. The air was cool and the land felt calm. "I don't want to rush this," she said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I also don't want to go back to silence," she added. He stopped walking and looked at her. "We won't. Even if this leads somewhere unexpected, it won't be silent." Standing a little closer than before, no one asked questions. In a small town, people learned to read between the lines. She worried at first about how she would be seen. She had always been careful, private, but she realized something important. Most people were too busy with their own lives to judge hers, and those who mattered would understand. One night, she invited him to her home. It was a simple place, clean and quiet. She felt nervous, not because of anything improper, but because letting someone into her personal space felt like a deeper kind of truth. They sat at her small table, drinking tea. The room felt warm and safe. "This is the first time I've invited someone in like this," she admitted. He smiled softly. "Thank you for trusting me." The words settled gently between them. They talked late into the night, not about the past this time, but about what they wanted from the future. Not in grand plans, but in honest hopes, peace, companionship, a life where they did not feel alone while standing next to someone else. Still, uncertainty remained. Neither of them pretended otherwise. "There's a chance this doesn't turn into what we imagine," he said. "I know," she replied. "But there's also a chance it becomes something real, and that's worth facing." Sometimes it meant stepping forward and accepting risk with care. As weeks passed, their connection deepened, not through dramatic gestures, but through consistency, through showing up, through listening, through choosing honesty again and again. She found herself smiling more, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because she no longer felt like she was hiding from it. He found himself looking forward to moments he once ignored, conversations, shared silence, the quiet comfort of being understood. They were not two people suddenly changed. They were two people slowly becoming more truthful. One evening, as they stood watching the sun set, she realized something important. The confession that night had not been the end of her story. It had been the beginning of a new way of living. The rancher felt it too. The question he had asked had not pushed her away. It had brought them closer, grounded in reality instead of fantasy. They did not know exactly where the path would lead, but now they were walking it side by side, eyes open, hearts steady, and voices no longer held back. And for both of them, that was already a kind of change they never thought possible. The change did not arrive suddenly. It settled into their lives the way morning light slowly fills a room, quiet, steady, certain. By the time the season shifted, both of them understood that what they were building was not based on excitement alone. It was built on choice. Every day they chose to speak instead of hide, to listen instead of assume, to stay present instead of stepping back. They did not announce anything to the town. They did not need to. People noticed on their own. They saw her walking with more ease, her shoulders less tense. They saw him pause longer in conversations, his attention no longer divided. In a small place, these details spoke louder than words. There were still difficult moments, days when old habits tried to return. She sometimes caught herself pulling inward, choosing quiet when something needed to be said. When that happened, she reminded herself that silence had once cost her years. She learned to speak even when her voice felt unsure. He faced his own struggles too. There were moments when he wanted to step back, to return to the safety of routine and distance. Opening his life had made him aware of how much he had avoided before, but each time doubt appeared, he chose to stay honest. One evening, after a long day, they sat together outside her house. The sky was clear, the stars sharp against the dark. The air felt calm. "I used to believe that life happened to you," he said. "That if you waited long enough, things would settle into place. Now I know strength can also mean stepping forward." One afternoon, she stood alone in her kitchen, sunlight warming the floor, and thought about the woman she had been before that night at the bar. She remembered the weight she had carried, the careful distance she kept from her own desires. She did not judge that woman. She understood her now. Later that day, she met him near the edge of town. He looked tired, dust on his clothes, but his eyes softened when he saw her. "I was thinking," she said as they walked, "about how close we came to never having this. But maybe not full ones." "I'm glad you asked me that question," she said. He looked surprised. "I was afraid it might hurt you." Not through grand gestures, but through consistency, through showing up even on hard days, through choosing patience when it would have been easier to pull away. She no longer felt like she was standing on the outside of her own life. She felt rooted, present, seen. He no longer felt like time was simply passing him by. He felt engaged, aware of each moment's weight and value. One morning she woke before sunrise and stepped outside. The land was still, the sky slowly lightening. She realized then that the night she had feared for so long had given her something unexpected, not just connection, but courage. Later that day, she told him something she had never said aloud before. "I used to think love was something you protected yourself from," she said. "Now I think it's something you protect by being honest." One confession, one careful question, and the courage to face what followed had changed everything. And in the end, that was enough.